The best heroes to solo queue to Grandmaster with in Overwatch 2. A good solo queue hero is one that's flexible and doesn't have to rely on teammates to get their value with. Let's get into it. Starting off in D tier, I unfortunately have Mercy. Mercy's value is directly dependent on how good her DPS are, which it can help thanks to a damage boost, but she by herself doesn't provide any direct value. It's why when people do unranked GMs on Mercy, they take a lot longer compared to any other hero, because it's hard to show off your individual skill every teamfight. Next up is Roadhog. I'm not going to spend too much time on him because we know he's getting a rework in Season 7, but you just can't really do much. The one shot was his carry potential that allowed him to be an S tier solo queue pick, but now that's no longer the case. Next I have Pharah. It's no secret that Pharah is highly dependent on a Mercy in order to be useful, hence why she isn't that good of a solo queue pick. Pharah despises long sightlines and open areas, preferring tons of pieces of cover to fly around and close the distance with. If you don't have a Mercy pocket and you're playing up against double hit scan and you're on Junkertown, I hope you have fun. Finishing off the D tier, I actually have Lifeweaver. Now I put him in D tier in my tier list, which I still don't regret, despite what others might say. He still hasn't got too much carry potential in his kits. His heal is actually pretty good because of how easy it is to heal flankers and maintain map control, and he doesn't die off cooldown now thanks to the sustain buffs. Not to mention, Tree of Life is actually an ultimate now. But I'd rather Kiriko Kunai, Moira's Suck, Illari's Gun, Bap's Gun, Ana's Gun, pretty much every way to deal damage and support I'd rather have over Weaver's Thorns. They're still a bit underwhelming. Now onto the C tier, I'm starting off with Reinhardt. We all know Reinhardt is pretty awful on maps like Dorado, Paraiso, and Gibraltar. Pair that with how many resources he needs, and at best, he's a situational pick, especially as you climb out the metal ranks. Not saying he can't work, but there's better tanks out there to solo queue with. If the stars align, he can certainly be a great pick, similar to Reinhardt's, but rarely do those stars align. I find that you get the most value with Reaper when running Zarya, which isn't a reliable solo queue strategy of course. His flank potential can also be telegraphed in higher ranks, and don't get me started on the maps that this guy sucks on. After Reaper I have Junkrat's. Despite his ability to one-shot with his mine, he's just too map dependent to work. If the sightlines are too long and there aren't enough close areas for him to play around, he can certainly struggle. After Junkrat I have Sombra. EMP was already a chore to charge for mediocre Sombra players, which is now only worsened by the EMP nerf. She has less mobility than Tracer, less damage than Tracer, just in exchange for more range and a bit more utility. If you want to carry on Sombra, Tracer is right there for you. Finishing off the C tier, I have Brigitte. I hate saying this as a Brig main myself, but Brig was already quite tough to solo queue with. Now with the shield and rally nerf, you really need to be good at Brig to get the most value with her. Don't get me wrong, she's great into Doom or dive comps in general, but a little more mediocre to carry with against most other comps. Just before I continue, I'd like to mention that if you want to get coaching, check me out on Uscrim. Link below, on with the video. Now starting off in the B tier, I have Moira. She was a difficult one to place, solely because of her two drastically different playstyles. She's got a more team-reliant one on healbotting a group of teammates, and a more selfish, DPS-oriented one where she leverages her insane survivability as a support. In other words, the TikTok Moira playstyle. The reason why she isn't any higher is mainly because of the utility and flexibility that Kiriko can bring. After Moira, I have Mei. Mei on King's Row is just so free. The walls you get on second points are really clean, and you don't need to deal with a tank in order to get crazy value off those walls. But on more open maps, like New Queen Streets, or if you have a dive tank, while you can certainly still make Mei work, it's certainly going to be a lot harder. Next up, I have Ball. Despite the Sombra nerf, she is still a relatively hard counter to Ball, and Neasel already made a video explaining why Ball isn't that great at the moment. In short, his mines aren't useful, he can't outduel tanks, and other heroes, like a Doomfist, can match his mobility. Moving on to the third main support I have on this list, I have Lucio. His three distinct playstyles make Lucio an all-around pick, regardless of the meta, but his solo carry potential is limited by his damage, the harsh skill curve, and by the map on occasion. After Lucio, I have Zenyatta. More now than ever, Zen is a complete glass cannon of a hero. Even with Sombra Tracer being out of meta, I still think he's too risky to play. On the one hand, you have Zen's damage, his one-shot potential, and his discord, but on the other hand, you have his big-ass hitbox, and his extremely low sustain. He's just a tad bit too situational to play 24/7. As for the penultimate hero in this tier list, I have Winston. While on the surface, Winston may have low damage and low sustain when compared to his tank counterparts, the amount of space he can create, even after Sombra Tracer being dissolved, is still super underrated. In the lower ranks, you're going to be outright killing squishies with good bubbles, and in the higher ranks, your team is actually going to follow up off your bubble cycles. Not to mention, Primal is also a great expression of individual skill. Lastly, in this tier, I have Ashe, just a bit reliant on Mercy to get that additional value, and she suffers a bit depending on the map. Tight sightlines and close range high grounds aren't in your favour. Next up, I have Ramattra. I think he's a bit underrated right now, and it's not even that Ram is bad per se. If you want to one-trick him, by all means, go ahead. But I think tanks like Queen or Orisa have better matchups than to dive, and offer comparable sustain and damage to what Ram has. After Ram, I have Sigma. We've seen a bit of play from Sigma in the Overwatch League, where he takes over Orisa's place in the anti-dive comp, offering more range in exchange for less sustain. Thankfully, the reason why he's seeing more play is because dive is becoming more uncommon, but that is still why Sigma struggles, hence why he isn't going any higher. Taking the penultimate spot in the B tier, I have Genji. Yes, he technically has a high value ceiling, and he can do crazy shit by himself, but it's often dependent on how much support he can get from his team. Nano Boost makes Blade drastically better, and Genji has no self-sustain on his own. Finishing off the B tier, I have Cassidy. He got quite a big change this season to what I think is an overall nerf, where he has more sustain, but less range and less damage. I think this gives him a more unique identity, meaning he's better into dive comps, but overall, I would still prefer a hero like Soldier. Now entering the A tier, I have Bastion. He recently got an array of buffs that I honestly think are underrated. He finally has some form of self-sustain with the heal in his turret mode, and the change to his gun and grenade are most welcome. He's even seeing some play in the Overwatch League at the moment. Just make sure you time your turret form well to maximise your value. Some might say that this placement is quite high for her, but she's pretty decent against Orisa and the meta comp right now. Her right clicks are also very underrated, not just because of the two-shot potential, but also because of the deceiving hitbox. You would be surprised at the amount of attention and kills that she can get in her spam-oriented playstyle. After Sim is Torb. I used to say that Torb is the more unreliable version of Cassidy. Now that is much less the case. Torb is easier than Cassidy, and had an insane fire rate buff that is exacerbated in overloads. Your DPS is kinda nuts now, and unlike Cassidy, you have no fall off, and you have more sustain due to overloads, and hell, maybe even a better ultimate. After Torb, I have Sojourn. Sojourn has slowly been less reliant on Mercy to get her value, and we've seen that in the Overwatch League. They still combo well, but Sojourn's power is, no pun intended, in her power slides. That burst damage and that burst mobility is just something that someone like Ashe or even Soldier doesn't really have. Following Sojourn, I have Widowmaker. Sombra Tracer is out of meta, so the only thing really holding her back is the map. I don't think I've seen her on Flashpoint once, which makes sense because of the tight sightlines and the narrow enclosed areas on Suravasa and Junk City. Still, if you're mechanically talented, this hero will take you to new heights. Next up is Soldier. Soldier has always been a great solo queue rank pick, mainly because of the mobility in his sprints, the range in his gun, and the sustain in his fields. Just rotate to different angles in the mid-fight, and hard flank if you're not playing against Sombra Tracer Ball. After Soldier, I have Alari. It's been a few days since she's taken place in Ranked, and even before that, we saw her being played in Contenders and in the Overwatch League. Her gun is very powerful against deterring flankers, as well as overall dueling, allowing for insane carry potential. And her ultimates, whilst not great in pro play, can be devastating in Ranked. A very good hybrid hero to solo queue with. After Alari, I have Zarya. With Orisa being meta right now, Zarya can be a strong counterpick. You don't have to rely on teammates to get charge, and at full charge, nobody else does more damage than her. The only critiques are the lack of high gun control, her weakness against dive, and how squishy she can be, but those are relatively minor concerns in the current meta. Following Zarya, I have Baptiste. He struggles most against Sombra Tracer Dive, but now that's not really a factor in the current meta. His self-sustain and his own damage make him very strong when paired with anti-dive comps like the Orisa and Lari that we're seeing. After Bap, I have Junker Queen. Although her mobility and her range isn't optimal, everything else about her kit absolutely is. Knife is still extremely underrated and is basically a hog hook. Her ultimate is still strong, her damage is still one of the highest in the tank category, and her sustain is pretty high. She only really struggles on very dive-centric maps like Gibraltar and Dorado. After Queen, I have Hanzo. Hanzo's one-shot potential, burst damage, and vertical mobility is still undeniable. Again, the death of Sombra Tracer means he's a more viable hero, and I think he's pretty good with or against the meta being Orisa Bapalari. The penultimate hero that I have is Echo. She can be played against Brawl, Poke, Dive, and anything in between. Great mobility and range, great on most maps, a very strong hero overall, and just on the small occasion, her counterpart, Genji, would be the better swap. Finishing off the A tier, I have Doomfist. That seismic buff change really affected the uptime of Doomfist. He's in fights more than ever now, and if you land an empowered punch, that's basically a free kill nowadays. And the best part is, you don't need to rely on your teammates or your comp to get value on the hero. Only issue is CC, thanks to Orisa, and maybe the map, but Doom is kinda slept on right now. Now entering the S tier, I have Orisa. Not gonna lie, I think Orisa is a bit power crept, not only thanks to the range change, but also the damage buff that she got quite a while back. I still think that due to the nature of how tanks are in Overwatch, which I talked more about in my last video, Orisa can still be hard to carry, but more often than not, you're doing more than creating space. After the horse herself, I have Ana. One big biotic grenade, and that easily spells defeat for the enemy team, especially if they haven't got a Kiriko. She also has the best stun that supports have, and pair that with her high healing outputs and the decent DPS from her gun, there really is no excuse to not rank up with Ana. The second to last tank I have in the S tier is D.Va. D.Va is of course a very versatile hero, no thanks to that boosters buff, and pretty good in almost every map barring the super linear brawly ones. Even then, her ability to mark those carry DPS unlike any other tank in the game, and her almost infinite skill ceiling makes her a great solo queue choice to get good at. For the penultimate hero in this video, I have Kiriko. I've spoken about this hero enough, but her mobility is just insane. You flank, two-shot someone, maybe you pop Suzu, and then you TP back. Not to mention, I don't know why the devs keep buffing this hero, it kinda makes me speechless. And the last hero in this list is Tracer. Again, I'm still working on a video for her, but she likely has the highest skill ceiling out of any hero in this entire game. If you're not good on Tracer, or you're not winning games on her, it's almost always a skill issue. And that's it for the video. Shout out to my channel members, Slothdust, XBenny, Ushiup, Wix, Broken by 50%, Susfering, Chris Jones, and Craig, and let me know your thoughts down below. Until next time.